You walked away, not halfway, not with the door cracked for their eventual return, not with continued friendship or occasional contact or hope-filled waiting for them to be ready. You walked away completely, accepted their patterns as deal breakers rather than as challenges to overcome through your patience, chose yourself over them in ways that were clear, final, undeniable, said goodbye, or accepted their goodbye with such finality that their usual ability to return when convenient was eliminated, made yourself unavailable in the definitive way that communicated, "This is over. I'm choosing myself. You no longer have access to me." The walking away was clean, was decisive, was so complete that even their defended psychology recognized this wasn't strategic withdrawal or temporary boundary. This was you actually leaving, actually choosing yourself, actually enforcing consequence for patterns that had been violating your stated needs for extended period. And you're walking away. The empath who stayed through everything finally choosing to go, created dual response in the avoidant that seems contradictory, but actually reveals something crucial about their psychology. They're mad, furious that you changed the rules they'd been successfully operating under, angry that you stopped accepting what you'd been accepting, enraged that you enforced boundaries they'd been violating with impunity. The anger is ego response to lost control, to being rejected by a person they assumed they could take for granted indefinitely, to discovering their patterns have real permanent consequences when they believed those patterns were sustainable because you'd been sustaining them through your tolerance. But simultaneously, and this is what makes the response complex, they're impressed, genuinely impressed in ways their defended system rarely experiences about anyone. Impressed by the strength it took to walk away from someone you loved, impressed by the self-respect that enforcing boundaries demonstrated, impressed by the decisiveness of choosing yourself over maintaining relationship that wasn't serving you. The impression coexists with the anger. Both are real. Both are responses to the same action. You're walking away. Understanding why the avoidant is simultaneously mad and impressed when the empath walks away reveals what the walking away demonstrated about you, what it triggered in their wounded system, why both responses are genuine even though they seem contradictory, and why the impression they feel, however real, doesn't mean they've developed capacity to be worthy of the person who impressed them by leaving. The 3 reasons they're mad, what your walking away took from them. The avoidance anger about the empath walking away reveals what they lost through your boundary enforcement. Understanding the anger helps you see what you are actually providing that you're leaving eliminated. Reason 1, you eliminated their control over the dynamic by refusing to play the role they'd cast you in. The anger is ego response to powerlessness they're experiencing for first time. Throughout relationship, they had control. Not complete control, but significant control over key aspects of the dynamic. They controlled the distance, could create it knowing you'd try to close it. Controlled the emotional availability, could withhold knowing you'd accept whatever minimal amount they provided. Controlled whether relationship continued, could keep you through minimal effort because your tolerance for their patterns made the relationship sustainable despite those patterns. The control gave them comfortable position where they could be defended self without consequences, could maintain emotional safety through distance while still having relationship through your willingness to accept the distance. But your walking away eliminated the control, eliminated their ability to create distance knowing you'd bridge it. You're not bridging anymore, you're gone. Eliminated their ability to withhold knowing you'd accept scraps. You're not accepting scraps anymore, you're requiring reciprocity elsewhere. Eliminated their ability to keep relationship through minimal effort, relationship is over because you chose yourself. The loss of control creates powerlessness. They can't control whether you stay, can't control whether you return, can't control the outcome, and powerlessness triggers rage in the avoidance system. Rage that's defense against the terror of being powerless. The anger at you for walking away is really anger at themselves for being powerless to prevent your walking away. Is ego protecting itself from having to acknowledge it lost something it can't get back through control? The anger reveals how much control they had and how much losing that control threatens their defended position. Reason 2. Your boundary enforcement proved their patterns have real consequences, destroying their illusion that patterns were sustainable indefinitely. During relationship, patterns had no real consequences. Had stated consequences? You said the patterns bothered you, said you needed them to change, said you couldn't continue indefinitely if patterns persisted. But stated consequences without enforced consequences are just words, and words without action taught them. Patterns don't have real consequences. You'll state you need change. You'll communicate hurt. You'll express needs, but you'll stay anyway. You'll keep accepting the patterns while hoping they'll change. The lack of real consequences created illusion. Illusion that patterns were sustainable, that they could maintain defended position indefinitely without losing you, that your patience and understanding were unlimited resources they could rely on forever. Your walking away destroyed the illusion. Proved patterns do have real consequences. Proved that stating needs, while not enforcing them, was temporary tolerance that had limit. Proved that you staying despite patterns didn't mean you'd stay indefinitely. Meant only that you stayed until you reached your limit. The destruction of illusion is what creates the anger, because illusion was protecting them from having to acknowledge their patterns were destroying the relationship, was letting them believe the relationship was sustainable in its current form. Your walking away proved the relationship wasn't sustainable. Proved patterns were destroying it, even while you tolerated them. Proved they were losing you, even while you were staying, just losing you slowly until you reached the point where leaving became necessary. The anger is defense against having to acknowledge this truth, against having to recognize their patterns had real costs they weren't seeing while you were absorbing those costs, against having to admit they destroyed something valuable through patterns they believed were sustainable. Reason 3. You proved you didn't need them the way they needed to believe you needed them, threatening their entire sense of significance in your life. Throughout relationship, they believed you needed them more than they needed you, couldn't function without them, would be devastated by losing them. This belief gave them sense of significance, made them feel important, made them feel like they mattered. Your staying despite patterns confirmed the belief. If you needed them, you'd stay despite patterns. You stayed. Therefore, the belief seemed valid. You needed them enough to accept insufficient treatment rather than leave. But your walking away destroyed the belief. Proved you don't need them. Proved you can function without them. Proved you can not only survive losing them, but can thrive after choosing yourself. Your walking away proved you wanted the relationship when it served you, but you could leave when it stopped serving you. You loved them, but you loved yourself more. You valued the partnership, but you valued your well-being above maintaining partnership that violated your well-being. This proof threatens their significance. If you don't need them, they're not as important as they believed. If you can thrive without them, they weren't essential. If you can walk away, their presence wasn't necessary for your functioning. The threat to their significance creates anger. Anger that defends against the painful recognition that they weren't as needed as their ego required believing, that you were choosing to stay, not needing to stay. That your walking away proves the choice could change when relationships stop serving you. The anger protects them from acknowledging their significance in your life was never based on your need, was based on your choice. And choice that can be revoked based on how relationship serves you is much less secure than need that persists regardless of treatment. The anger is ego defending against this recognition. The 3 reasons they're impressed. What your walking away revealed about you. Simultaneously with the anger, the avoidant experiences genuine impression. Understanding what impresses them helps you see what strength your walking away demonstrated. Reason 1. Walking away required strength. They recognize they don't possess. The impression is acknowledgement that you did something they're not capable of doing. The avoidant recognizes, maybe not consciously, but definitely at some level, that walking away from someone you love is hard, requires strength, requires choosing yourself over relationship, even when choosing relationship would be easier, requires enforcing boundaries, even when enforcing creates loss. They recognize this because they're not capable of it. They're not capable of walking away from defended position, even when defended position is destroying their relationships. Not capable of choosing vulnerability over safety, even when safety is costing them connection. Not capable of doing uncomfortable thing, like genuine therapeutic work, even when uncomfortable thing would create capacity they don't have. They see in your walking away the strength to do hard thing, the strength to choose long-term well-being over short-term comfort, the strength to enforce boundaries that cost you relationship you wanted. This strength impresses them because they recognize they don't have it. They maintain defended position because changing feels too hard. They avoid vulnerability because being vulnerable feels too scary. They don't do therapeutic work because work feels too uncomfortable. Your walking away demonstrated you can do the hard thing when hard thing is necessary for your well-being. This demonstration of strength they lack is what creates the impression, is genuine recognition that you possess capacity they don't possess. Capacity to choose yourself, even when choosing yourself is difficult. Reason 2. The decisiveness was rare and unexpected. Most people threaten, but don't follow through. You're actually following through, proved you're different. Throughout relationship, you probably stated boundaries, communicated needs, maybe even threatened to leave if patterns didn't change. The stating and threatening are common. Most people do this. State needs, communicate hurt, threaten consequences. But most people, especially empaths who love avoidance, don't follow through. Don't enforce the consequences they threaten. Don't actually leave when they say they'll leave if patterns persist. The gap between words and actions is what the avoidant expects. Expects you to threaten but not follow through. To state you'll leave but then stay anyway. To communicate consequences but not enforce them. You're actually following through was unexpected, was rare, was different from what they're accustomed to from empaths who love them. You didn't just threaten, you did it. Didn't just state the boundary, you enforced it. Didn't just say you'd leave if patterns continued, you actually left when patterns continued. The decisiveness, the alignment between what you said and what you did impresses them because it's rare. Because most people don't have this alignment. Most people say one thing and do another. You said you couldn't continue if patterns persisted. Patterns persisted. You left. The following through proves your person, whose words match actions, whose boundaries are real rather than negotiable, whose stated consequences will be enforced rather than repeatedly reset. This rarity impresses them, creates recognition that you're different from people whose threats can be ignored because the threats never materialize into action. Reason 3. You chose yourself with clarity they've never seen in an empath. The self-respect required to leave someone you love rather than betray yourself impressed them at deep level. The deepest impression? You chose yourself. Chose your well-being over relationship. Chose your needs over their comfort. Chose yourself with clarity that's rare in empaths, who typically sacrifice themselves to maintain relationships. The avoidant is accustomed to empaths who betray themselves, who sacrifice their needs to accommodate the avoidant's defended position, who choose the relationship over themselves repeatedly. This self-betrayal is what makes empaths sustainable partners for avoidance. Empaths will accept insufficient treatment rather than leave, making the avoidance pattern sustainable. But you didn't betray yourself. You chose yourself. You recognized the relationship wasn't serving you, and you left instead of continuing to sacrifice yourself to maintain it. This choosing yourself impresses them profoundly, creates recognition that you have self-respect they're not accustomed to seeing in empaths. Have clarity about your worth that won't allow you to accept treatment that violates that worth. Have strength to choose yourself, even when choosing yourself means losing relationship you wanted. The self-respect required to walk away from someone you love, rather than continue betraying yourself by staying in relationship that harms you. This impresses them at level they might not consciously acknowledge, but definitely feel. Create sense that you're rare, that you're different, that you're a person who actually values themselves enough to enforce boundaries that protect self-worth. This impression is genuine, is real recognition of your strength, and the recognition, as we'll explore, doesn't mean they've developed capacity to be worthy of the strength they're recognizing. Why both responses coexist, the complexity of the avoidant's simultaneous anger and impression. Understanding why the avoidant can be mad and impressed simultaneously reveals the internal conflict you're walking away created in their defended psychology. The anger protects the ego while the impression threatens it. Both are defenses against different aspects of the same wound. The anger and impression seem contradictory, but they're actually responses to different aspects of what your walking away means. The anger protects the ego, protects it from having to acknowledge they lost control, protects it from recognizing patterns had consequences they weren't prepared for, protects it from admitting you don't need them the way they needed to believe. The anger is defensive, is ego protecting itself from painful recognitions your walking away forces. But the impression threatens the ego, threatens it by creating recognition that you possess strength they lack, that you're capable of things they're not capable of, that you chose yourself in ways that reveal their inability to choose uncomfortable growth over comfortable defending. The impression is threatening because it highlights their limitations through showing your capacities. Both responses are real. Both are genuine. Both are defenses against the wound your walking away created. The anger defends by attacking you, blaming you for changing rules, for being unreasonable, for giving up too easily. The impression defends by admiring you, acknowledging your strength in ways that avoid having to acknowledge their weakness. Both let them avoid the core wound. They destroyed something valuable through patterns they could have changed if they'd been willing to do the uncomfortable work. The anger avoids this through blaming you. The impression avoids this through admiring you. Both are defenses. Both are real. Both coexist because they're serving same defensive purpose through different mechanisms. They're mad at what you took from them, impressed by how you took it. The anger is about the loss. The impression is about the execution. The anger focuses on what they lost control, lost comfortable position, lost you. The loss is what creates the rage, creates sense of being wronged, creates feeling that you changed rules unfairly. The anger is about the loss itself, about what your walking away cost them. But the impression focuses on how you did it, the strength it took, the decisiveness of the execution, the self-respect that enabled choosing yourself. The impression is about recognizing the qualities you demonstrated through how you walked away, about acknowledging the capacity the walking away revealed. Both are responses to same action, but they're focusing on different aspects. Anger focuses on what they lost through the action. Impression focuses on what you demonstrated through the action. Both are genuine. You did take something from them, their control, their comfortable position, their access to you. This loss creates real anger. You did demonstrate something impressive: strength, decisiveness, self-respect. This demonstration creates real impression. The coexistence makes sense when you understand they're evaluating different aspects of same event. The event cost them something, creates anger. The event revealed your qualities, creates impression. Both responses are valid reactions to different dimensions of your walking away. The impression doesn't override the anger. They can recognize your strength while still resenting that your strength eliminated their comfort. The impression being real doesn't mean it eliminates the anger. Doesn't mean they stop being mad because they're impressed. Both coexist. They can recognize your strength, can genuinely admire that you chose yourself, that you followed through, that you enforced boundaries, while simultaneously resenting that your strength cost them their comfortable position. Can be impressed by the self-respect while being angry that the self-respect meant you left. Can acknowledge the decisiveness while being furious that the decisiveness eliminated their control. The recognition of your qualities doesn't override their resentment about losing what your qualities cost them. Both are present. Both are real. They're impressed by who you proved yourself to be. They're angry about what you, being that person, meant for them. The impression and anger aren't in opposition. They're complementary responses to complex event that demonstrated your strength while costing them their comfort. Both the strength and the cost are real. Both create genuine responses. The responses coexist because what happened, your walking away, created both something to admire and something to resent from their perspective. The uncomfortable mirror. Turn, if you need to know. They're impressed, examine why their validation still matters. But examine why you want to know they're impressed. Why it matters to you that the avoidant recognizes the strength it took to walk away. Why their acknowledgement of your self-respect holds significance. Because if you've genuinely walked away for yourself, if you're genuinely choosing your healing, if you're truly building life without them, their impression of your strength should be irrelevant to you. You shouldn't need their recognition of what it took to leave. Shouldn't care whether they're impressed by your decisiveness. Shouldn't be seeking validation through their acknowledgement of your self-respect. The fact that their impression matters reveals you're still oriented toward them, still needing their validation, still using their recognition as measure of whether your choice was right or your strength was real. This orientation means you haven't fully walked away. You've physically left, but you're mentally still there, needing their acknowledgement, wanting their recognition, seeking their validation of your strength. Real walking away means you don't care if they're impressed. Don't need them to recognize your strength. Don't seek their validation of your choice. You chose yourself because staying was harming you. The choice was about you, about your well-being, about your healing. Not about impressing them or earning their recognition or getting them to acknowledge your worth. If you're seeking their impression, you're still giving them power, still letting their evaluation of you matter, still oriented toward their response rather than toward your own building. Stop needing to know they're impressed. Stop caring whether they recognize your strength. Stop seeking any form of validation from them, whether it's their suffering or their recognition or their impression. Walk away completely, not just physically, mentally, emotionally, completely. Their impression of you is irrelevant to your healing. Your freedom from them is what matters. Choose freedom. Stop tracking whether they're impressed by the freedom you chose, what the impression reveals about what they value and why they can't provide what they admire. The avoidant being impressed by the empath's walking away reveals something about their value system and about why they can't be the kind of partner who would prevent the walking away they admire. They value strength, but can't access it themselves, creating pattern where they admire in others what they can't develop in themselves. The avoidant values strength, values people who choose themselves, values decisiveness, values self-respect, values all the qualities you demonstrated by walking away. This valuing is genuine, is real recognition that these qualities are admirable, but valuing something and being capable of it are different things. They value strength, but they can't access it themselves. Can't choose the hard thing, like therapeutic work, even though they value people who can choose hard things. Can't be decisive about their own growth, even though they admire decisiveness in others. Can't enforce boundaries on their own defended position, even though they respect people who enforce boundaries. The gap between what they value and what they can access is the tragedy. They recognize and admire strength. They're not capable of the strength they admire. This creates pattern where they're drawn to strong people, people like you who choose themselves, while simultaneously being incapable of being the kind of partner a strong person needs. They admire your walking away. They couldn't prevent your walking away by becoming someone you didn't need to walk away from. They value the strength. They can't develop the vulnerability that would make them worthy of someone who has that strength. The valuing without capacity is what makes their impression irrelevant to whether relationship could work. They recognize what's admirable. They can't be what someone admirable needs. The impression is intellectual recognition without emotional capacity. They can cognitively acknowledge your worth while remaining unable to honor it through reciprocal partnership. The impression is intellectual, is cognitive recognition that what you did took strength, that the strength is admirable, that you're a person of quality based on the qualities you demonstrated. But intellectual recognition isn't emotional capacity. They can think that took strength without developing capacity to reciprocate strength, can recognize that person values themselves without becoming capable of valuing you in ways that honor your self-worth, can acknowledge that was decisive without becoming capable of the emotional availability that would prevent need for decisive leaving. The impression is head level, stays in cognitive realm, doesn't translate to heart level capacity for reciprocal partnership. They can be impressed by your strength while remaining defended against the vulnerability that partnership with you would require. Can admire your self-respect while being unable to provide treatment that honors self-respect. Can recognize your decisiveness while being incapable of the consistent emotional presence that would make decisiveness unnecessary. The impression without capacity is why being impressed doesn't predict readiness. They see your worth. They can't meet your worth with equivalent worth. The seeing is real. The capacity to honor what they're seeing doesn't exist. Both are true. The impression is genuine intellectual recognition. The capacity for partnership that would prevent need for impressive walking away doesn't develop through intellectual recognition alone. They're impressed by the walking away, but would repeat the patterns if you returned. The admiration doesn't create the transformation that would make return viable. They're impressed. genuinely impressed by your strength, your decisiveness, your self-respect. And if you returned, if their impression seemed like recognition that might motivate different behavior, they'd repeat the patterns, would return to defended position, would resume emotional unavailability, would recreate the dynamic that made walking away necessary. Why? Because impression doesn't create capacity. Admiring your strength doesn't heal their wounds. Recognizing your self-respect doesn't reprogram their nervous system. Acknowledging your decisiveness doesn't develop their ability to sustain vulnerability. The impression is response to crisis of loss, is them recognizing qualities in you that they wish they had. But recognition doesn't create possession. Wishing they had your strength doesn't give them your strength. Admiring your self-respect doesn't create their capacity for the emotional availability that would honor self-respect. They're impressed by what you did. They'd create conditions that would require you to do it again if you returned. Because the patterns driving their behavior, the attachment wounds, the defended position, the terror of vulnerability, don't change through being impressed by someone who walked away from those patterns. Change requires sustained therapeutic work addressing the wounds. Impression is just crisis response that acknowledges what they lost without creating capacity to honor what they lost if it were restored. Their being impressed is real. Their being impressed doesn't make them worthy of impressive person who impressed them by leaving. Both are true. The impression validates you. The impression doesn't mean returning would work differently. Use the validation. Don't mistake it for readiness. The specific moments, when the impression overtakes the anger, when admiration becomes primary response. Understanding when the avoidance impression becomes more prominent than their anger reveals the timeline of their processing and why later recognition doesn't indicate earlier capacity. When they see you thriving, your visible well-being without them proves the walking away was right choice, creating shift from anger to admiration. Early after the walking away, anger dominates. They're furious about the loss, focused on what you took from them, defending their ego through blaming you. But time passes, and they see you through social media or mutual friends or chance encounter, see you thriving, actually thriving, genuinely happy, visibly better without them than you were with them. The witnessing shifts something, shifts focus from what they lost to what you gained, from anger about their loss to admiration of your gain. Your thriving proves the walking away was right choice, proves you weren't just reacting emotionally, but were making decision that served your well-being, proves the strength to walk away led to better life. This proof diminishes the anger, makes the anger feel less justified when your thriving demonstrates you weren't wrong to leave, makes the impression more prominent. You had the strength to walk away. The strength led to thriving. The connection between strength and positive outcome is what creates shift toward admiration. They're still angry about losing you, but the anger is overshadowed by recognition that you walking away was right decision for you, that the strength to make right decision is admirable, that you're a person who chose yourself and benefited from the choosing. The thriving creates the shift, creates moment when impression overtakes anger as primary response. When they fail repeatedly to replace you, accumulated evidence of your irreplaceability creates respect that overrides the resentment. Similarly, impression becomes dominant after they've tried to replace you. After first failed relationship, anger might still dominate, might blame you for setting impossible standard. After third failed relationship, impression starts growing, recognition that maybe you weren't replaceable. After 10th failed relationship, impression dominates, Accumulated evidence proves you were exceptional, and walking away from exceptional person without doing work to deserve exceptional person was their failure, not your fault. The failed attempts to replace you teach them something. Teach them you were rare, were providing something exceptional, were a person whose qualities aren't easily found. This teaching creates respect that overrides resentment. They resent losing you, but the resentment is overshadowed by respect for what you were. Respect that's proven through inability to find replacement. The respect grows with each failed attempt. Each person who doesn't understand the way you understood. Each person who doesn't accept the way you accepted. Each person who doesn't measure up to the standard you set. The accumulated failures to replace create recognition that you were irreplaceable, that walking away from irreplaceable person showed more strength than they initially recognized, that you knew your worth well enough to leave when worth wasn't being honored. The recognition creates shift, creates moment when respect for your qualities overtakes anger about your leaving, when impression of your strength becomes more prominent than resentment about their loss, when they recognize their patterns caused the loss, belated understanding that they created the ending shifts, blame from you to themselves, making impression pure. Finally, impression becomes dominant when they develop enough self-awareness to recognize their patterns caused the ending, when they stop blaming you for leaving and start recognizing they created conditions that made leaving necessary, when they acknowledge, maybe through therapy, maybe through painful self-reflection, that you didn't give up too easily or change rules unfairly, that you enforced reasonable boundaries in response to patterns that were harming you. This recognition shifts blame, shifts it from you to themselves. You didn't wrong them by leaving. They wronged you through patterns that made leaving necessary. You didn't take something from them unjustly. They lost something through their own behavior. This shift from blaming you to recognizing their responsibility makes the impression pure, makes it uncontaminated by anger. You had the strength to leave someone whose patterns were harming you. This strength is purely admirable when they recognize the patterns were actually harming you and leaving was healthy response to harm. The impression becomes primary. Your person who values themselves enough to leave harm, who has strength to choose themselves, who demonstrates self-respect through enforcing boundaries. All of this is admirable. The anger dissipates when they recognize the leaving was your healthy response to their harmful patterns. Impression remains. Pure recognition of your strength without anger contaminating the recognition. This shift happens, if it happens, late. Happens after extensive processing. Happens after they've done enough work to recognize their patterns as problems, rather than as just who they are. The timing matters. The impression becoming pure and primary happens too late to benefit relationship with you. Happens after you're gone. Proves they can eventually recognize what you were. Proves recognition comes too late to create capacity to honor what they're recognizing. What the empath should do with the knowledge that they're both resented and admired. Understanding the avoidance dual response should inform the empath's choices, using the information to strengthen resolve rather than to reconsider the leaving. Use the anger to confirm you threaten their comfort. Their fury validates that you enforced real boundaries with real consequences. They're angry, furious about your leaving. This anger is information. Information that you threatened something important to them. Threatened their comfort, their control, their defended position that was sustainable only through your tolerance. Use the anger to validate that you did something right. You enforced boundaries that had real consequences. You didn't just state needs. You enforced them through leaving when needs weren't met. You didn't just threaten consequences. You implemented consequences when patterns persisted. The anger proves the consequences were real, were significant, were threatening to their comfortable position. If they weren't angry, the boundaries wouldn't have been real. Their anger is evidence the boundaries actually limited their behavior in ways that mattered. Use this evidence. Use it to confirm you were right to leave, right to enforce, right to choose yourself over maintaining their comfort. The anger they're expressing is validation that you stopped accepting what you'd been accepting, stopped tolerating what you'd been tolerating, stopped sacrificing yourself for their defended position. The anger is them upset about losing comfortable dynamic. Let them be upset. Their upset confirms the dynamic was comfortable for them and insufficient for you. Confirms leaving was necessary because staying would have meant continued sacrifice of your needs for their comfort. Use the impression to validate your strength. Their recognition of what it took to leave confirms you did something genuinely difficult and admirable. They're impressed. This impression is also information. Information that what you did took strength. They recognize and admire. Use this recognition to validate yourself, to confirm that choosing yourself was hard, thing that required real strength, that walking away from someone you loved required courage, that enforcing boundaries that cost you relationship required self-respect. Their impression confirms all of this, confirms you did something difficult, something admirable, something that demonstrated qualities worth having. Use the validation, not to feel superior, to feel confirmed, to know that the hard thing you did was actually hard, was actually worthy of recognition, was actually demonstration of strength and self-respect and decisiveness that are valuable qualities. You chose yourself. It was hard. Their impression confirms it was hard, confirms you had strength to do hard thing, confirms you're a person who can choose yourself even when choosing yourself is difficult. This confirmation should strengthen your resolve, should confirm you made right choice, should validate that walking away demonstrated qualities in yourself that you should be proud of. Their impression is gift, not gift that should pull you back, gift that should confirm you were right to leave. Don't return because you impressed them. Impression without demonstrated capacity is just intellectual recognition, not readiness for relationship. They're impressed. And the impression doesn't mean you should return. Doesn't mean they're ready for relationship with you. Doesn't mean they're recognizing your worth creates their capacity to honor your worth. Impression is intellectual. It's cognitive recognition. Doesn't translate to emotional capacity. They can be impressed by your strength while remaining incapable of the partnership your strength deserves. Can admire your self-respect while being unable to provide treatment that honors self-respect. Can recognize your decisiveness while being incapable of emotional availability that would prevent need for future decisiveness. Don't mistake their impression for their readiness. Don't return because they recognize what you did took strength. They recognize the strength. They haven't developed capacity to be worthy of person who has that strength. The impression is real. The impression doesn't predict viable relationship. Use the impression to validate yourself. Don't use it to justify returning to someone whose impressed recognition doesn't mean transformed capacity. They admire what you did. What you did was leave them. Honor what you did by staying gone. That's the answer to their impression. Not returning because they finally recognize your worth. Staying gone because recognizing worth after destroying it through patterns doesn't create capacity to honor worth if restored. The final truth about being both mad and impressed. You walked away, chose yourself, enforced boundaries, made yourself unavailable in ways that eliminated their control and their access. The walking away created dual response in the avoidant, created anger, fury about losing control, about patterns having consequences, about you not needing them. Created impression, genuine recognition of strength it took, decisiveness you demonstrated, self-respect you embodied. Both responses are real. Both are genuine reactions to different aspects of your walking away. Both coexist. They can be mad about what they lost while being impressed by how you took it from them, can resent the consequences while admiring the strength that enforced consequences, can be furious about loss while recognizing that what they lost was exceptional person who demonstrated exceptional qualities through choosing to leave. The anger validates you enforced real boundaries. The impression validates you demonstrated real strength. Both validations confirm you made right choice. Confirm that leaving was necessary because staying would have meant accepting insufficient treatment from someone whose anger about your boundaries proves the boundaries threatened their comfort. Confirm that leaving was admirable because doing so required strength that even the person you left recognizes and admires. Use both validations. Use the anger to confirm you stopped accepting what shouldn't be accepted. Use the impression to confirm you demonstrated qualities worth demonstrating. Both confirm leaving was right choice made by a person who had strength to make it and self-respect to need it. They're mad and impressed. Both are true. Both are permanent responses to your permanent choice. Let them stay mad. Let them stay impressed. Both responses validate different aspects of what you did. You took something from them, their comfort. You demonstrated something admirable, your strength. Both are worth validating. The taking confirms you stopped giving what they weren't reciprocating. The demonstrating confirms you showed qualities that make you worthy of partner who can reciprocate. Both validations should strengthen your resolve to stay gone, should confirm that person who gets mad about boundaries being enforced is person who benefited from boundaries being weak. That person who's impressed by your leaving is person who recognizes qualities they can't match with equivalent qualities. Both confirm the incompatibility. Both confirm leaving was right choice. Both confirm staying gone is maintaining right choice. They're mad and impressed because you walked away. Let them be both. Both responses are theirs to manage. Your response is staying gone, is building in the freedom the walking away created, is honoring the strength they recognized by continuing to choose yourself. That's the answer to their dual response. Not returning because they're impressed, not engaging because they're angry. Staying gone because both responses prove you made right choice to leave someone whose anger and impression both confirm they're not ready for relationship with person who had strength to leave them. They're mad and impressed. You're free in building. All responses are permanent. Only yours determines your future. Choose building. Choose freedom. Choose honoring the strength they recognized by continuing to use that strength to choose yourself. That's the truth. That's what their being mad and impressed should confirm for you. Not that you should return, that you should keep going forward, building life where their anger is their problem and their impression is irrelevant because you're too busy thriving to care about their response to the thriving. Live that. Be that. That's the life their mad and impressed response is happening in response to. Keep living it. Keep being the person who walks away when walking away is necessary. That's who impressed them. Stay that person by staying gone.